What's up, everyone? Hope that y'all are doing well tonight. Welcome back to the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. Nothing grinds my gears more than arguing with somebody over who's the better quarterback, and they want to use rings as the end-all, be-all to justify why that quarterback is better, when there are so many mid-QBs like Joe Flacco, Brad Johnson, and Trent Dilfer that have won Super Bowls. Dan Marino has no rings. I guess that means that Nick Foles and Jalen Hurts are better than him because they do? No, it doesn't. Ring culture has poisoned sports discourse because we focus too much on who has more championships than the other, that we seem to forget that winning a championship is a team accomplishment, not an individual accomplishment, a team accomplishment. One person can't win a championship by himself. He needs a good team around him to do so. Bill Russell has the most championships in NBA history, but he's never brought up in the GOAT conversation with LeBron and MJ. Nick Foles won a flipping Super Bowl as a backup quarterback. I guess that means that he's better than Dan Marino, right? No. Winning a ring does not make you one of the best at your position. You winning a championship was you being a part of a really good team. Matthew Stafford has been so disrespected for the majority of his career. When he was with the Detroit Lions, he was always one of the most talented quarterbacks in the NFL. But because he didn't have a lot of postseason success, because he was stuck on an underachieving franchise at the time, he was always overlooked and considered to be overrated until he got traded to the LA Rams, won the Super Bowl with Sean McVay. Then all of a sudden, everybody realized how good Matthew Stafford was, and now we consider him to be an elite quarterback and a borderline Hall of Famer. Jalen Hurts is a really good quarterback. I think he's elite, but he's not better than Lamar, Mahomes, Burrow, or Josh Allen from a talent standpoint. But because he has a ring, though, you have Philadelphia Eagles fans who tell you otherwise. But if you were to take Jalen Hurts off last year's Eagles team and you put him on the New Orleans Saints, he wouldn't have been as good as what he was with the Philadelphia Eagles. You could have put Mahomes, Allen, or any quarterback that you wanted on Philadelphia's team last year that you consider to be top 5 at their position, and they still would have had the same amount of success. Ring culture has blinded NFL fans so much that they use it to justify who's more talented than the other, when that's not a good measuring stick when it comes to analyzing how good a quarterback is. There are so many different variables that goes into somebody winning a Super Bowl that you can't use it to define how talented somebody is. Some of the greatest athletes in the world don't have championships because they haven't been on the team or they haven't had a coach good enough to help them win one. You need good coaching, a good offensive line, a solid defense to win a Super Bowl. And if you don't have one of those things, you are at a disadvantage. Joe Burrow, in the second season with the Bengals, went to the Super Bowl and lost because his offensive line was garbage. You cannot win a championship just solely being a good player. You need other good pieces around you that help you accomplish that. Winning a ring does not define how talented a quarterback is. Josh Allen is one of the most talented quarterbacks in NFL history, and he doesn't have a ring. Tom Brady has more championships than Aaron Rodgers, but was he considered to be more talented than Aaron Rodgers? No. Peyton Manning won his last Super Bowl, his final season in the NFL, when he couldn't throw a football more than 25 yards downfield. Winning a championship does not equate to talent when there have been so many mid to subpar quarterbacks that have won one, which is why using rings And your argument to justify why somebody is better than the other is such a lazy argument. And it really annoys me. If I'm talking ball with you and you want to use Super Bowls as a measuring stick for who's better, I'm going to stop going back and forth with you because you're not worth my time to debate with. When we are analyzing who is better than who, we need to go off talent. Are you more accurate than this quarterback? Are you better at extending plays, elevating your team in big moments? What separates the elite quarterbacks from the good and average quarterbacks are the ones that can win despite not having everything going right around them. That's what separates Brady and Mahomes from everybody else. They were still able to win championships despite not having rosters as good as what guys like Jalen Hurts and Joe Flacco have had. There's nothing wrong with saying that, yeah, this quarterback may have a Super Bowl, but he's not as talented as some of his contemporaries. There's nothing wrong with saying that Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback, but he's not better than Lamar, Mahomes, or any of the other top 5 quarterbacks in the game right now. Winning a ring, it helps out your legacy, but it doesn't define how good you are as a player. You played a month of good football. Cool. You still aren't more talented than those other quarterbacks that don't have one. You just were in a better situation to win one than what those guys were. And you were able to execute in the biggest moments when your name was called upon. You don't need to be the most talented quarterback in the NFL to win a Super Bowl when we have so many mid quarterbacks that have won one. Based off a lot of you guys' logic who like to use rings and your arguments for why quarterbacks are better than the other, Dan Marino's the worst quarterback in NFL history if he's ever brought up in a conversation between him, Jalen Hurts, Matthew Stafford, or whoever has a championship. Ring culture is the most toxic thing in sports discourse right now, and it really grinds my gears how we try to use it to define an overall player's talent and overall career. Charles Barkley is one of the best NBA players in the history of that sport, and he doesn't have a championship. It still doesn't take away from how phenomenal of a player that he was. Every time a quarterback has a great rookie season, entering their second year, you always hear the same old cliches. Oh, they're going to have a sophomore slump because defensive coordinators have more film on them. Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes won MVPs in their second seasons. Joe Burrow, in his second year playing for the Bengals, coming off a broken leg, took them to the Super Bowl. Not every quarterback that has a good rookie season has a sophomore slump. Jayden Daniels has been put in a situation that makes it nearly impossible for him to regress in his second season playing for the Commanders. He often gets compared to C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud had a sophomore slump because the Houston Texans neglected to improve their offensive line, and that hindered him. Jayden Daniels isn't in the same situation that C.J. Stroud was in last year. The Washington Commanders improved their offensive line. They traded for Laremy Tunsil. They drafted a really good offensive tackle out of Oregon. They also improved his supporting cast. It is not the same situation that C.J. Stroud was in. Every quarterback that has a successful rookie campaign doesn't always regress in their second season. What separates Jayden Daniels from some of the other quarterbacks that we have seen have sophomore slumps is that he has a team, a coaching staff, and a front office that is committed to giving him everything possible for him to have the most success. You can only be as good as the team that you have around you. No matter how good you may be, you can only elevate a team to a certain extent. The most important thing that a quarterback needs to perform at a high level is a good offensive line. When you think of some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Lamar, something that they all have in common is that they have a good supporting cast and they have somewhat decent offensive lines outside of Joe Burrow. But even then, elite quarterbacks are expected to overcome certain limitations, which we saw Jayden Daniels do last year. He took the Washington Commanders to the NFC Championship when before the season, they weren't even expected to win more than 8 games. Jayden Daniels is not your average quarterback. When you're able to take a franchise that has been irrelevant and one of the biggest running jokes in the NFL for well over 2 decades to 1 game shy of making it to the Super Bowl, you are cut differently. It's not fair to Jayden Daniels to put him in the box with CJ Stroud when they were in 2 different situations. And even then, CJ Stroud was balling out in the playoffs. The Chargers were the favorites in that wild card game against the Texans. And that's when CJ Stroud played his best football. The whole assumption that Jayden Daniels is going to regress in year 2 is based off these worn out cliches that everybody in the league is getting better, they're getting more film on him, and he's not improving at all. That's bullshit. You make it seem like these defensive coordinators are scheming for Jayden Daniels, and he's not watching film himself. He's not putting in the work to get better. There have been countless quarterbacks that have played in the NFL that didn't regress in year 2, and the ones that did either weren't that good or didn't have a good situation going into their second season. And that's why they weren't able to elevate their level of play in their sophomore year. Sophomore slumps are more than just a quarterback regressing. It's about the team regressing. You need to have a good roster around you for you to flourish. Jayden Daniels has that. All the Commanders did was get better. They didn't get worse at any position. You can't get worse when the expectations were so low for you last year. To overachieve the way that they did is a testament to how good of a quarterback Jayden Daniels is. He already is a top 5 quarterback in my eyes. You don't need 2-3 years to figure out Jayden Daniels is one of the best at his position. There were not too many quarterbacks in this league that could have went as far as what Jayden Daniels did with this below average Commanders roster that he had in his first season in the league. That's why I don't understand these whole presumptions that he's destined to fall off in year 2. What about Bo Nix? Is he going to fall off in year 2? I don't hear nobody putting sophomore slump claims to him when he should be the one who, if anybody, should be destined to have a sophomore slump based off how easy the Broncos' schedule was and the fact that they had a losing record against teams with winning records. I don't hear nobody saying that Caleb Williams is going to have a sophomore slump. Contrary to popular belief, he had a pretty solid rookie season. But why is it that Jayden Daniels is the one that all of a sudden is just destined to fall off? Andy Dalton didn't fall off after he had a good rookie season. There have been so many examples of quarterbacks that were able to elevate their level of play in year 2 after having a good rookie season. But we want to overlook this because we want to find a way to knock off what already has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, that being Jayden Daniels. I don't agree with it. I really don't. Jayden Daniels, I would not be surprised if we see the Commanders once again back in the NFC Championship. He is the most talented quarterback in the NFC in terms of how accurately he throws the football, And with how dynamic he is running the football, he virtually is unstoppable. That's why I don't see him having a sophomore slump. He has a way better situation going into his second season compared to what C.J. Stroud had. C.J. Stroud lost two of his best receivers at some point during the 2024 season. Nico Collins got banged up. Tank Dell was out for the season once again, and the offensive line was garbage. Jayden Daniels isn't in that same situation. He has one of the best play callers in the league, and Cliff Kingsbury. He's going to be able to adapt. He's going to be able to further expand this offense around Jayden Daniels' skill set. The Houston Texans, they fired their offensive coordinator last year. This is not the same situation that C.J. Stroud was in when you think of what Jayden Daniels has going into his second year. You know we're in the peak of the offseason when social media is overreacting to minicamp and OTA clips. So Travis Hunter has had a few clips that have gone viral of him not running the most polished routes, catching with his body. None of this flipping matters because when the regular season starts, Travis Hunter is going to look way better when he's in pads on the field than what he does in shorts, tank tops, and a helmet. Jamar Chase struggled in OTAs and minicamp and training camp during his rookie season. And then once the season finally kicked off, he ended up balling out. What minicamp and OTAs are for is to help you knock off the rust. Travis Hunter hasn't played football in 3 to 4 months. He's been doing nothing but a world tour pretty much, doing a bunch of interviews, whether if that was at the combine, during the draft process, doing fan meetups or whatever. Travis Hunter, it's expected for him to have some growing pains this early into his NFL career. But once the games finally get played, you're about to see a man-child step on that field. We have never seen a player enter the NFL that has had the ability to play both offense and defense at the level that Travis Hunter has the ability to do. He's not the most refined route runner as a wide receiver. He doesn't need to be. He has elite ball skills, and he's a superb athlete. One thing that doesn't get talked about at all when it comes to Travis Hunter's conditioning is the fact that he was playing over 100+ snaps in Boulder, Colorado, where the elevation is higher than any other place in America. It's hard to breathe playing in the state of Colorado. And yet Travis Hunter had good enough conditioning where it wasn't a problem for him. I'm not worried about Travis Hunter having a few struggles and a few OTA clips. What these aggregator accounts do on these social media platforms is they try to force rage bait from fans. So they know if they post a few clips of Travis Hunter running a few bad routes, they know people are going to get open arms about it. They're going to get worked out about it or worked up about it. They're going to comment, and that's how these aggregator accounts get paid. Guys like Dove Kleiman, I just block them or I mute them off my page because I know everything that they post is just to get engagement. It doesn't have anything meaningful when it comes to assessing how good or how bad some of these players are. Travis Hunter, with how good he is at just being able to just dominate off pure athleticism, he'll be good enough in his rookie season to where he can play both sides of the ball at a pretty high level. Although he may not be as good playing both ways in the NFL as what he was in college, he isn't going to go out there and get burned by every wide receiver that he lines up against. He's not going to get shut down by all of the elite cornerbacks that he's going to be lining up against. Travis Hunter has so much athleticism to where he's one of the top athletes in the NFL already. You can win in the NFL off athleticism. DK Metcalf isn't the most refined route runner, and he has had a really good career up to this point. Garrett Wilson reminds me a lot of Travis Hunter. His first season in the NFL, he wasn't the best route runner in the world, but he was a good enough athlete that he was able to overcome not being the best route runner. In the NFL, there's more than one way to being good at your position. Not everybody needs to be a savvy route runner to be an elite receiver. Everybody has their own special skill set that separates them from everybody else. And that's what Travis Hunter has. What makes Travis Hunter so special is that his ball skills are so good. Him being able to position himself to win 50-50 balls downfield, how elusive he is after the catch, how dynamic he is with the ball in his hands, his football IQ, having an understanding of how cornerbacks are trying to attack him when he's playing wide receiver, and how receivers are trying to attack him when he's playing cornerback is what allows him to play both ways at such a high level. Why should anybody give a damn about a few struggles that he has had early during minicamp and OTAs? It's not real football. It's pretty much the equivalent to 7-on-7. Show me how good Travis Hunter is going to be 3-4 months from now when the regular season kicks off. Football isn't played in shorts and tank tops. It's played in pads and helmets. That's all anybody should care about. Getting worked up over minicamp clips, it's just off-season nonsense. That's what the off-season is. You're bored. There's nothing else to talk about. There's nothing really to focus on but what these guys are doing in OTAs and minicamps. There are workouts to get you back into football shape. If you played high school football before August rolled around and you got pads, you had 2 months of conditioning when you're doing sprinters on the track. You're in the weight room. That's what this is. This is to get you back in the football form. So who gives a damn about a few bad clips? It doesn't define him as a player. Aaron Rodgers has yet to sign with the Steelers, and mandatory minicamp is just around the corner. And with him losing a bunch of meaningful time in OTAs and minicamp to develop chemistry and rapport with his wide receivers, the Steelers are better off without Aaron Rodgers. This is going to be a throwaway season anyway. Getting Aaron Rodgers isn't going to get the Steelers anywhere further than where they've gone the last couple of years. They've made it to the playoffs. Without George Pickens, even with Aaron Rodgers, you're still going to be a first-round exit in the postseason. The Steelers are better off giving up on trying to get Aaron Rodgers and rolling with Will Howard as their starting quarterback this year. You need to see what you have in Will Howard. Even though he was a day 3 pick, there may be some upside with him, but you won't get to see that if you want to run it 1 year with Aaron Rodgers, who is 41 years old. He'll be 42 at the end of this season. He's not the missing piece to getting the Steelers over the hump in the playoffs. This is going to be a throwaway season for the Steelers. They have acquired a lot of draft capital so they can possibly move up for a quarterback in the 2026 draft. But if you actually do have something in Will Howard, but you don't get an opportunity to see him play, then you pretty much could be wasting a first-round draft pick on a quarterback to where you may not need one if Will Howard actually has the ability to be a really good quarterback. You need to see what Will Howard has. This is a pretty good situation for him. The offensive line is as good as it's ever been in the last couple of years. Even without George Pickens, you still have DK Metcalf. Roman Wilson could have a breakout season. Pat Freiermuth is one of the more underrated tight ends in the league, and you should still have a really good rushing attack with you picking up Caleb Johnson in the draft, and you always know that the Steelers are going to have a top-notch defense. This is a pretty ideal situation for Will Howard to get the reins as QB1. There's no point in starting Mason Rudolph over Will Howard. We already know what Mason Rudolph is. He's a backup quarterback, a low fringe starter if you need one, if your starting quarterback gets injured. There is no reason why Mason Rudolph should be starting over Will Howard this year. We know what Mason Rudolph's ceiling is. We don't know what Will Howard's ceiling is. And there also is no reason for the Steelers to sign Aaron Rodgers, who has dragged on these negotiations so long to the point where by the time he ends up signing, you're going to go into training camp and he's not going to have enough chemistry and he's not going to have enough understanding of the playbook for the Steelers to come into this year and hit the ground running. And Aaron Rodgers is not going to change what the Steelers have done in the playoffs these last couple of years. I thought that with George Pickens and DK Metcalf, that would have helped us get past round one in the playoffs with Aaron Rodgers throwing to one of the best receiving duos in the NFL. But with Pickens being gone, unless you're able to pull off the trade for another good receiver to pair alongside of DK Metcalf, Aaron Rodgers is not going to be that good for you. Aaron Rodgers will be better off in Minnesota or playing on a team that feels they're a quarterback away because they have an elite offensive line, an elite group of wide receivers, and an elite defense. The Steelers are more than just a quarterback away from being contenders this year. You also have a defensive-minded head coach, and you have an offensive coordinator that his offensive play calling has been heavily questionable at times. This is not a great situation for Aaron Rodgers, and it's not a good situation for the Pittsburgh Steelers to get a quarterback that we don't know just how much good football he has left in the tank, if any. For all we know, Aaron Rodgers could come to Pittsburgh and he's just a complete shell of himself and he fizzles out like how Peyton Manning did in his final season with the Denver Broncos. Does Aaron Rodgers still have the arm strength? Does he still have the accuracy? We can assume that he does, but we don't know. We haven't seen him in OTAs. We haven't seen him at minicamp. We most likely won't see him at mandatory minicamp. We saw what happened last year when Aaron Rodgers missed mandatory minicamp to go do drugs. Things didn't go well for him in the Jets in 2024 when he did that. So why are the Steelers repeating the same mistakes that the Jets did? This franchise is so much better than getting on their knees trying to suck Aaron Rodgers' dick to get him to play. You don't need Aaron Rodgers. We are the Pittsburgh Steelers, damn it. We at one point were the gold standard of what a well-ran organization in the NFL used to be. Waiting on an old, aging, and regressing quarterback like Aaron Rodgers further shows how the standard in Pittsburgh has fallen. If the Steelers had a better group of wide receivers, I would have no problem waiting on Aaron Rodgers. But without that, you're pretty much just wasting time that could be allotted to Will Howard to help him develop and to help him grow possibly into a good enough starting quarterback that can finally get the Steelers past the first round of the playoffs. The Steelers are just a good quarterback and a few more playmakers away from being Super Bowl contenders again. Aaron Rodgers is not going to change the same fate that the Steelers have suffered these past couple of years. That's why they are better off without Aaron. And I wanted to give Aaron Rodgers the benefit of a doubt that he still had one more good year of football left in him. But when you're missing out on meaningful development time to get that rapport, to get that chemistry with your receivers, it just leaves me with a lot of questions about how ready you're going to be come week one of this season. You're playing the New York Jets. You may not be that high on Justin Fields, but they damn sure are going to have a really good defense. That defense is stacked. And Aaron Rodgers most likely won't be playing in the preseason because the Steelers won't want to risk him getting injured. It just isn't worth the Steelers continuing to wait on Aaron Rodgers anymore. Let's see what they have in Will Howard. It just makes more sense. You don't know what's there with him. You're better off going the entire season trying to see if Will Howard's good than trying to run it for 1 year with Aaron Rodgers with the hope that maybe he has a little bit of juice left in that tank and he can channel the bad man energy that he used to have. But at best, you win 2-3 more games in the regular season. You're seated higher in the playoffs. But once you come to Super Wild Card weekend, you're going to get sent home by either Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, or any of the other top quarterbacks in the AFC. Aaron Rodgers is not what he used to be. He can't elevate a team that doesn't understand offense. That's why it makes no sense for the Steelers to continue to wait on him. Let's run it 1 year with Will Howard. If Will Howard isn't good, guess what? The Steelers are finally going to be in position to land an elite quarterback prospect in the draft. I really want the Steelers to get Lenore Sellers. And getting Aaron Rodgers may take the Steelers out of position to do so. Getting Will Howard, though, what do you have to lose? If he's bad, you're right in position to land a franchise-changing quarterback in next draft. But if he's good, then you have your franchise quarterback of the future. And you can build around him, have him on the cheap rookie deal, which gives you more cap space to use in free agency to get high-level players to improve the offense. And you can save the first-round pick that you would have used to get a quarterback. It makes a lot of sense for the Steelers to not sign Aaron Rodgers at this point. With him dragging out this process, they should just run it with Will Howard for this season. The Bears going from worst to first in the NFC North is not a crazy thought to have. Last year on paper, they were supposed to be a playoff team, but they ended up underachieving because they had a bad offensive line and bad coaching. When you are a poorly coached football team, it hinders the performance of your squad. With the hiring of Ben Johnson, if he lives up to all of this high, being considered to be the second coming of Sean McVay, the Bears not only easily will be the best team in the NFC North, but they will be in Super Bowl contention. On paper, the Bears have one of the most talented rosters in the NFC. You have a loaded offense with a loaded group of receivers for Caleb Williams to throw the ball to going into his second season. He has an improved offensive line. You have a genius calling the plays for him who's going to put him in better situations to succeed and thrive than what Shane Waldron did in his rookie season. The defense is stacked. You got Dennis Allen, who isn't a good head coach, but he's one of the best defensive coordinators in the game. You got Grady Jarrett in free agency. You got Montez Sweat in the trade a few years ago, who has been really good for you. You got one of the better secondaries in the NFL. From a roster standpoint, talent-wise, the Chicago Bears are just as good as the Detroit Lions, the Minnesota Vikings, and the Green Bay Packers. What's going to get them over the hump is the genius of Ben Johnson. For the last couple of seasons, we have seen new coaches take their teams to the playoffs. Last year, it was Jim Harbaugh. The Chargers on paper didn't look like a playoff team, but they went anyway because of how good of a coach Jim Harbaugh is. 2 years ago, when DeMeco Ryans first became the head coach of the Houston Texans, they were expected to be one of the worst teams in the NFL that season, and they won the AFC South. Trevor Lawrence's second season, after they fired Urban Meyer and they replaced him with Doug Peterson, they won the AFC South division. It is not unfathomable to see the Bears going from worst to first in the NFC North. History doesn't define how good you're going to be because it's a different season. And the Bears are not the same team now that they were a year ago when they had Matt Eberflus. They have a better coach, they have a better roster, and they have a better situation for Caleb Williams to thrive than what he did in year one in Chicago. There is a reason why he didn't want to play for the Chicago Bears, and he was right. He didn't like the coaching staff. What happened after Thanksgiving? Matt Eberflus got fired. A few weeks after, they had fired Shane Waldron. Ben Johnson is going to tailor this offense to Caleb Williams' skill set. Yes, it's an unknown the kind of offense Ben Johnson is going to run, because he's not going to run the same scheme that he did when he was with the Lions. But it's fair to assume that whatever scheme he runs is going to get more results out of Caleb Williams, or better results out of Caleb Williams, than what we saw him produce his first season in the league. I am expecting the Chicago Bears to win the NFC North. The NFL has a problem, or NFL fans have a problem, of overlooking the impact of good coaching. Nick Sirianni, I saw this tweet about him from the franchise guy where he asked, this is a coach that has won a Super Bowl, but yet we don't know just how good of a coach he is. No bad coach goes far in the playoffs. Jason Garrett underachieved for several years with stacked rosters in Dallas. Bill O'Brien had a prime Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins along with TJ Watt, and didn't go no further than the second round of the playoffs. If you have a poorly coached team, despite how talented the roster is, you're not going to go that far, because coaching is the difference. Once you get into the playoffs, you can win a Super Bowl with average quarterback play if you have a good head coach, but you can't win in the playoffs if you have an elite quarterback and a bad coach. When you get into these tight one-possession games late in the fourth quarter, coaching, the understanding of situational football becomes really important. Having a coach that can make the right coordinator hires also is a factor when it goes into these games. Nick Sirianni is a good CEO head coach. Just because he's not the brightest X's and O's coach like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan doesn't mean that he does nothing at all. He gets the most out of these players. He gets these players ready to play. They love playing for Nick Sirianni. He was able to de-escalate the locker room tension between Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. He was able to keep the morale of the team high. Nick Sirianni has one of the highest winning percentages out of any head coach in the NFL right now. He's like top 5, top 3. What does Nick Sirianni do? The answer is simple. He wins. He was the one who suggested Mekhi Becton moving from offensive tackle to guard, and that paid off. He was the one who lured Vic Fangio from Miami to Philadelphia, and that was one of the biggest moves that the Eagles made that helped them win the Super Bowl this past year. He hired Kellen Moore when he was perceived to not be that good as a play caller after how lefties went for him in Dallas and with the Los Angeles Chargers. Nick Sirianni is good at bringing people together, bringing his team together, and being able to get the most out of what has been the most talented team in the NFL these last 2-3 years. Just because you have a stacked team doesn't guarantee you're going to win a Super Bowl. We have seen so many talented teams in the past come up short of expectations relative to what they have on paper because they were held back by poor coaching. Tom Brady wouldn't have had the amount of Super Bowls that he currently has in his hardware right now if he didn't have Bill Belichick as his head coach. Tom Brady didn't make Bill Belichick. They both needed each other to win. Bill Belichick assembled some of the greatest defenses in NFL history. He has been able to shut down the greatest show on turf. That Los Angeles Rams offense, the year they beat them in the Super Bowl and only held them to 3 points. They were averaging 30 points per game that year. That wasn't because of Tom Brady why those Patriots defenses were so good. It was because of the mastermind that Bill Belichick was. And with Tom Brady always coming through for the Patriots with the game on the line, that helped out Bill Belichick as well because he knew that all his defense needed to do was get a stop, get the ball back to 12, and he was going to win the game for him. You can't win in today's NFL if you don't have good coaching, which is why it kind of annoys me when I see these tweets questioning the legitimacy of Nick Sirianni as a head coach. If Nick Sirianni wasn't a good coach, then why did Doug Peterson get fired? If anybody can win with the level of talent in Philadelphia, Doug Peterson should have been able to go back-to-back, just like we've seen Kansas City do recently. Kansas City isn't the most talented team, but they've been able to win 2 out of the last 3 Super Bowls because they have an elite head coach and an elite quarterback. But if Patrick Mahomes never got drafted by Andy Reid and he would have went to an organization like the Cleveland Browns that was poorly ran with poor coaching, he wouldn't have been the quarterback that he is today. We have to stop undermining good coaches. You have to be able to put your players in position to succeed. Players make plays, but coaches put players in the right spots to make those plays. Nick Sirianni is the most disrespected head coach in the NFL because in spite of him continuing to win, going to 2 Super Bowls, winning one of them, you still have folks in the media that question how good of a coach he is. What does he do? Nick Sirianni wins. That's what he does, and that's the only thing that matters. He doesn't need to be some wizard on the whiteboard. He doesn't need to be a defensive or offensive guru. All he needs is to be able to get the most out of the Philadelphia Eagles roster, and that's what he's done. Having a talented team has made it a lot easier for him, no doubt, but every team that's in the Super Bowl conversation has a talented squad. There's no team that goes to the Super Bowl with a below-average roster. You need to have good players to win. You don't necessarily need to have a great quarterback to win, but you do need to have a lot of high-level players at other positions in order to go deep in the playoffs. But just because you have a talented team, like we've seen with the master clapper Jason Garrett for so many years have, doesn't mean that you're going to go far come playoff time. The coaching and the talent have to align. They have to complement each other. Because when they don't, that's how you end up getting teams that constantly go one and done or don't live up to the hype that they have in the preseason.